Mother leopard begs help for her cubs. The reason why will break your heart. A desperate leopard charges toward people, not to attack, but to beg for help. Her tiny cubs are trapped, helpless, and time is running out. But when help finally arrives, a shocking danger steps from the shadows. This isn't just about saving two animals. It's about uncovering a secret so dark, it could destroy lives. Why would anyone want to hurt something so innocent? And when the truth is revealed, will anyone survive what's coming? Before we dive in, drop your name or city in the comments. It reminds me that behind every view is a real heartbeat. The evening air hung thick and heavy over the Appalachian Mountains as Clara Winton finished her final rounds at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. The chorus of crickets had just begun their nightly song when her phone buzzed urgently against the metal feeding table. She quickly wiped her hands on her worn jeans and answered. "Clara here," she said, immediately recognizing the number from the ranger station. "Clara, thank goodness," Ranger Matthews' voice crackled through, tense with worry. "We've got reports of unusual leopard activity near the Thompson Creek settlement. Usually these cats stay well away from humans, but this one's been spotted repeatedly over the past hour." Clara's heart quickened. After 15 years of working with wildlife, she knew that any break from normal animal behavior meant trouble. "I'm on my way," she said, already reaching for her emergency kit. The sun was setting as Clara's truck bounced along the rutted access road toward Thompson Creek. The golden light filtered through the dense canopy, creating shifting shadows that made her scan the tree line even more intently. As she rounded the final bend, she spotted the leopard dot. The magnificent creature stood at the edge of the tree line, its muscled form taut with anxiety. Clara's trained eye immediately noticed something was wrong. Instead of the typical aggressive posture a leopard might show near human settlements, this one paced back and forth, its head turning repeatedly toward a steep ravine before looking back at Clara's approaching vehicle. "Wow, that's definitely not normal," Clara muttered to herself, slowly bringing her truck to a stop. She grabbed her tranquilizer kit, just in case, but something in her gut told her this wasn't an aggressive animal. This was a desperate one. As Clara carefully stepped out of her truck, the leopard's behavior became even more unusual. Instead of retreating or showing signs of aggression, it took a few steps toward the ravine, then looked back at Clara, almost expectantly. The big cat repeated this motion, like a silent plea for Clara to follow. "What are you trying to tell?" "Ma?" Clara whispered, her heart pounding. 15 years of experience had taught her to trust her instincts when it came to animal behavior. This mother leopard, for she could now see it was clearly a female, was trying to communicate something urgent. With cautious steps, Clara began following the leopard's lead. The cat moved ahead, constantly checking to ensure Clara was still following. The ravine grew steeper, and Clara had to carefully pick her way down the rough terrain, using small trees and rocks for balance. Then she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold. A weak, distressed mewing carried up from below, accompanied by the distinctive metallic rattle of chain against stone. "Oh no," Clara breathed, quickening her pace as much as the treacherous slope would allow. The mother leopard had led her to a small clearing, and what Clara saw there made her stomach lurch. Two leopard cubs, no more than a few months old, lay trapped in crude wire snares. The cruel metal lines were anchored to nearby trees, leaving the cubs unable to free themselves. One cub's leg was caught, while the other had the wire wrapped around its middle. They had clearly been struggling for hours, their usually sleek fur matted with dirt and debris. "You poor babies," Clara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The mother leopard stood nearby, watching Clara with intelligent eyes that seemed to hold both fear and hope. The trust this wild animal was placing in her, despite every natural instinct, spoke volumes about the desperate situation. Clara's hands trembled with a mixture of anger and determination as she opened her kit. Someone had deliberately set these snares, targeting predators with no regard for the suffering they would cause. The crude nature of the traps suggested they weren't set by professional wildlife managers. This was the work of someone operating outside the law. As she carefully approached the cubs, Clara spoke in soft, soothing tones, both to calm the young animals and their watchful mother. "It's okay, little ones. I'm going to help you." She pulled on her thick protective gloves and began the delicate work of freeing the first cub. The mother leopard paced nearby, making occasional low sounds in her throat, but never showing any aggression toward Clara. It was as if she understood that this human was here to help, not harm. The trust being shown to her brought tears to Clara's eyes, even as she focused on her task. "I won't leave them like this," Clara promised the mother leopard, carefully working to loosen the wire around the first cub's leg. "I don't care who set these traps or why. This isn't right, and I'm going to make it right." The silent plea of the mother leopard had awakened something fierce in Clara's heart. She had devoted her life to helping wildlife, often facing dismissal from authorities who saw her as too emotional, too invested. But in this moment, watching this mother's desperate attempt to save her babies, Clara knew that her empathy wasn't a weakness. It was her greatest strength. Just as Clara's fingers worked to loosen the first wire snare, a sharp crack split the evening air. The sound echoed through the ravine, causing the mother leopard to growl and the cubs to whimper in fear. Clara's heart jumped into her throat as she recognized the unmistakable report of a high-powered rifle. "Step away from my property," a deep voice commanded from above. Clara looked up to see a large figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. As he moved down the slope, his features became clear. Royce Gatlin, the notorious landowner whose reputation for trophy hunting was well known throughout the region. He carried an expensive rifle casually over one shoulder, his heavy frame wrapped in high-end hunting gear that probably cost more than Clara made in 3 months. "These animals are suffering," Clara said, keeping her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "They need immediate help." Royce's face twisted into what might have been meant as a smile, but it held no warmth. "What they need isn't your concern. These cats are on my land, which makes them my property. Now step aside." The mother leopard's muscles tensed as she tracked Royce's movement, her protective instinct visible in every line of her body. Clara remained crouched between the cubs and Royce, her hands still on the snare. "That's not how wildlife law works, Mr. Gatlin," Clara said, reaching for her phone with her free hand. "I'm calling this in to Fish and Wildlife. These snares are illegal. Go ahead and try." Royce cut her off with a smirk. "Your phone won't work here. Modern technology is a wonderful thing. Signal blockers cover every inch of my property. Can't have trespassers making unnecessary calls. Now, can we?" Clara checked her phone anyway, her stomach sinking as she saw the no service message. Royce had thought of everything. He controlled this territory completely, creating his own private hunting kingdom where the usual rules didn't apply. The mother leopard let out a thunderous roar that echoed off the ravine walls. Instead of backing away, Clara found herself drawing strength from the sound. She looked directly into Royce's eyes, her voice firm despite her vulnerable position. "I'm not leaving these cubs in snares. That's cruel, and you know it." Royce's expression hardened, all pretense of civility dropping away. He took 2 steps forward, using his bulk to loom over Clara. "Let me be clear, Miss Winton. Yes, I know exactly who you are. The bleeding heart who can't mind her own business. This is my land, my rules. And people who don't respect that tend to have accidents." The threat hung in the air between them, as tangible as the humid evening air. Clara's fingers tightened on her tranquilizer kit, but she knew she was outmatched. Royce held all the cards, the weapon, the home field advantage, and apparently the ability to cut her off from any outside help. "You can't just," Clara started to protest. "I can do whatever I want here," Royce interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "These cats are worth a fortune to the right buyers. And you're trespassing, interfering with my business." He shifted his rifle, letting it slide down into a more ready position. "Last chance to walk away, Miss Winton. Next time I fire, it won't be a warning shot." The mother leopard paced, her eyes never leaving Royce as she positioned herself between him and her cubs. Clara saw in the big cat's protective stance a mirror of her own determination. Neither of them would back down, not when innocent lives hung in the balance. "If anything happens to these cubs," Clara said, her voice quiet but steel-hard, "I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of operation you're running here." Royce's laugh was cold and confident. "Threats, Miss Winton? That's not very wise. You have no idea what you're dealing with. This is bigger than your little wildlife rescue fantasy. I've built something here that you couldn't begin to understand, and I won't let some soft-hearted fool destroy it." The standoff stretched taut between them. Clara crouched by the trapped cubs, the mother leopard tense and ready to spring, and Royce with his finger resting beside his rifle's trigger. In that moment, Clara understood exactly what she was up against. This wasn't just about saving 2 leopard cubs anymore. She had stumbled onto something much darker, a trafficking operation protected by money and corruption, run by a man who believed his wealth put him above the law. Clara's hands were still shaking as she pulled into the ranger station's gravel parking lot. The confrontation with Royce had left her rattled but more determined than ever. She needed help, someone who would understand both the danger and the importance of what she'd discovered. The station's worn wooden door creaked open before she reached it. Elias Browder stood in the doorway, his broad frame filling it completely. His weathered face showed concern as he took in her troubled expression. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said quietly, stepping aside to let her in. Clara sank into one of the station's old chairs, running her hands through her disheveled hair. "Worse, I saw Royce Gatlin treating endangered species like his personal property." Elias's face grew serious. He closed the door and pulled up another chair, sitting down with the careful movements of someone used to thinking before acting. "Tell me everything." As Clara described the trapped cubs, the desperate mother, and Royce's threats, she watched Elias's expression darken, his hands, resting on his knees, slowly clenched into fists. "The signal jammers are illegal too," he said when she finished. "But that's the least of what he's doing wrong. Those snares," he shook his head. "I've seen similar setups in other areas, always on the edges of his property. Never could prove they were his." "We have to do something," Clara insisted, leaning forward. "Those cubs will die if we don't help them." Elias met her gaze steadily. "You need to understand what you're up against. Royce isn't just some rich hunter breaking wildlife laws. His family's owned half this county for generations. He's got judges in his pocket, politicians at his beck and call. The last ranger who tried to investigate him got transferred to Alaska." "I don't care about his connections," Clara said firmly. "I care about those animals." A ghost of a smile crossed Elias's face. "I know you do. That's what I've always admired about you, Clara. But we need to be smart about this." He stood up and walked to a filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. "I've been keeping track of suspicious activities around his property for the past year. Strange vehicles coming and going at night. Reports of gunshots in protected areas. Exotic animal parts showing up on the black market that shouldn't be anywhere near these mountains." Clara felt a surge of hope. "You've been building a case against them?" "Trying to," Elias admitted. "But it's not enough. We need hard evidence. Photos, videos, witnesses willing to talk." He paused, stunning her. It'll be dangerous. Royce doesn't just bend laws. He breaks people who get in his way. Clara thought about the mother leopard's desperate eyes, the cubs struggling in those cruel snares. I can set up camera traps. I know those woods better than anyone except maybe you. I've got some contacts in fish and wildlife who might help, Elias said slowly. People who can't be bought, but they'll need solid proof before they move against someone like Royce. Then we'll get it, Clara said firmly. I've already got a list of places where I've noticed unusual animal behavior patterns. Places where they avoid areas they should naturally inhabit. Elias nodded, pulling out a topographical map. I can help you place the cameras. Make sure they're well hidden. His ranger training and military background showed in how quickly he started marking strategic locations as they worked. Clara noticed how naturally they fell into sync, her knowledge of wildlife behavior complementing his tactical experience. There was something comforting about his steady presence, the careful way he considered each decision. Why are you willing to help me? She asked suddenly. You know what it could cost you. Elias was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. When I was in the service, I saw what happens when people with power decide they're above the law. Saw good. People get hurt because nobody stood up to stop it. He met her gaze. Sometimes you have to take a stand, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. They spent the next hour gathering supplies, camera traps, GPS units, and detailed maps of the area. Elias pulled out a satellite phone from his emergency gear. Signal jammers won't block this, he explained, showing her how to use it. If you get into trouble, call me, day or night. Clara felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. Thank you, Elias, really. Don't thank me yet, he said with a wry smile. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. People around here whisper about Royce's hunting parties, about animals they've seen that shouldn't be here. We need to get them to do more than whisper. We will, Clara said with conviction. Together, looking at their planned locations on the map, at the careful notes they'd made, Clara felt something she hadn't since discovering those trapped cubs' hope. With Elias's help, they had a chance to expose Royce's crimes and save not just the Leopard family, but all the animals suffering under his cruel empire. The moon cast long shadows through the trees as Clara and Elias moved quietly through the forest, their breath fogged in the cold night air while they checked the newly placed camera traps. Clara's boots crunched softly on fallen leaves as she adjusted the angle of a hidden camera. That's the third one tonight, she whispered. Just 2 more to go. Elias scanned the darkness, his military training evident in his alert posture. Something doesn't feel right. It's too quiet. Clara paused, listening. He was right. The usual chorus of night creatures had gone silent. No crickets chirping, no owls calling. Just an eerie stillness that made the hair on her neck stand. Up, a twig snapped in the darkness. Get down, Elias hissed, pulling Clara behind a fallen log just as a flashlight beam cut through the trees. Heavy footsteps approached, accompanied by the murmur of male voices. Clara's heart hammered in her chest as she recognized one of them, Royce Gatlin's deep drawl. They're here somewhere, Royce said. Fan out. Find them. More flashlights pierced the darkness. Clara counted at least 5 beams sweeping the forest. Floor. She felt Elias tense beside her, his hand finding hers in silent warning. I know you're out here, Miss Winton, Royce called out. This is private property. Trespassers get dealt with permanently. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Clara's fingers tightened around the memory card from the camera trap, evidence of snares and illegal hunting blinds that could expose Royce's operation. A shot rang out, splintering bark inches from Clara's head. She bit back a scream as wood. Fragments peppered her face. "That was a warning," Royce announced. "The next one won't be." Elias tugged her arm, motioning toward the sound of rushing water nearby. The river. Their only chance. They crawled backward, keeping low. Another shot. Cracked through the night, closer this time. Shouts erupted as their movement was spotted. "There they are. Get them." Clara and Elias broke into a run, zigzagging between trees as bullets whizzed past. The roar of the river grew louder with each desperate stride. Clara's lungs burned as they sprinted through the underbrush. They burst out of the tree line onto a high riverbank. The water churned below, swollen from recent rains. "Jump!" Elias yelled as more shots split the air. Clara felt a sharp burn across her arm as they leaped. The world tilted crazily as they plunged into the icy current. The river's force grabbed them instantly, tumbling them downstream. The cold shocked the breath from Clara's lungs. She fought to surface, gasping as her head broke through. Rapids tossed them like rag dolls, slamming them against rocks. Clara caught glimpses of Elias nearby, struggling to stay afloat. A massive log loomed ahead. Elias grabbed her jacket, kicking hard to angle them away from the obstacle. They barely cleared it, but the current pulled them under again. Clara's chest screamed for air. Just when she thought her lungs would burst, Elias's strong arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her up. They broke surface in calmer water, dragging themselves onto a gravel bar downstream. They lay there gasping, soaked, and shivering. Clara touched her arm where the bullet had grazed her, finding a shallow wound that stung fiercely. "Let me see." "That," Elias said hoarsely, examining the injury. "Just a scratch. You'll be okay." Clara nodded, still catching her breath. "He really tried to kill us." "Kill us?" "Yeah." Elias's face was grim. "No more pretending this is just about breaking wildlife laws. Royce means business." A rustle in the bushes made them both freeze. Clara's heart jumped as two gleaming eyes appeared in the darkness. The mother. Leopard. She stood watching them, her powerful form barely visible in the moonlight. Instead of fear, Clara felt a surge of determination. The leopard's presence reminded her exactly why they were fighting. This magnificent creature and her cubs represented everything Royce threatened. The wild beauty he would destroy for profit and cruel entertainment. "We're not giving up," Clara said firmly, meeting the leopard's steady gaze. "No matter what. It costs." The big cat held her gaze for a long moment before melting back into the shadows. Elias helped Clara to her feet, both of them battered but unbroken. "We need to move," he said quietly. "They'll be searching downstream." But first, he pulled out a waterproof case from his jacket. Inside was the satellite phone, still working. "Let's make sure that evidence gets to the right people." Clara gripped a memory card that she'd somehow managed to hold on to throughout their wild river ride. Their brush with death had only strengthened her resolve. Royce had shown his true colors tonight and proved exactly why he needed to be stopped. Clara winced as Elias cleaned the graze on her arm with antiseptic from his field kit. They had found shelter in an old ranger station, its musty walls offering temporary safety from both Royce's men and the chill that had settled into their bones after the river escape. "Hold still," Elias murmured, carefully wrapping gauze around her arm. This should help prevent infection. Clara barely felt the sting. Her mind raced, piecing together fragments of information that had been nagging at her. "The snares," she said suddenly. "They weren't meant to kill." Elias paused in his ministrations. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Those traps we found, they were designed to catch, not harm. The cables were padded. Who puts padding on snares?" Clara stood up, ignoring the protest of her bruised muscles. She began pacing the small room. "And the cubs, Royce didn't shoot them on sight. He claimed them as property." Understanding dawned in Elias's eyes. "Live capture, exactly." Clara ran her fingers through her still damp hair. I've been so focused on stopping the hunting, I missed the bigger picture. Royce isn't just killing these animals, he's selling them. Elias pulled out his phone, now working again away from Royce's signal jammers. His fingers moved quickly across the screen. There's been a spike in exotic animal seizures at ports across the southeast, mostly big cats. Officials suspect an organized trafficking ring, but they haven't been able to trace the source. Clara leaned over his shoulder, scanning the news articles. Look at these prices. A single leopard cub can fetch hundreds of thousands of dollars on the black market. Living trophies for private collectors. That explains the high-tech security around his property, Elias said, and why he's willing to kill to protect it. This isn't just about illegal hunting anymore. Clara sank back into her chair, the weight of the revelation settling over her. Those cubs aren't meant for a quick kill. They're merchandise. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. And their mother, she must have been captured the same way, escaped somehow. Now she's trying to save her babies. Elias's voice was soft with understanding. Clara pulled out the memory card they'd managed to save from the camera trap. We have pictures of the snare lines, the holding pens, but there has to be more. She looked up at Elias, her eyes bright with determination. If we can prove he's running an international trafficking operation, that's federal territory, Elias finished, beyond the reach of his local influence. Clara stood again, energy coursing through her despite her exhaustion. The mother leopard wasn't acting desperate just because her cubs were trapped. She was trying to show us something. She spread out a map of the area on the station's dusty desk. The ravine where we found the cubs, it's part of a whole network of old mining tunnels, perfect for hiding a staging area. Elias studied the map, his ranger's knowledge combining with his tactical training. These tunnels connect to an old access road, ideal for moving cargo without being seen. Cargo, Clara repeated, the word making her sick. Living, breathing cargo. She thought of the leopard cubs, terrified and alone in those cruel snares. How many other animals had suffered the same fate? How many had been shipped off to lives of captivity, torn from their mothers and their freedom? She turned to Elias, her voice steady despite the anger and determination burning in her chest. We have to stop him. Not just for these cubs, but for all of them. This isn't about one family of leopards anymore. Elias nodded, his expression grave. This is about dismantling an empire built on suffering. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. But Clara, Royce has already shown he's willing to kill to protect his operation. Going after him means I know the risks, Clara interrupted. But I also know we can't walk away. Not now. She looked down at their joined hands, drawing strength from his steady presence. Those animals don't have anyone else to fight for them. Then we fight smart, Elias said. We gather evidence, build a case that's too big for him to bury, and we stay alive doing it. Clara nodded, her mind already mapping out their next moves. The mother leopard was still out there, watching, waiting. Her cubs were still trapped in Royce's cruel game. But now Clara understood the true scope of what they were facing and what they had to do to end it. This wasn't just about saving one family. It was about exposing a darkness that had festered too long in these mountains, about standing up against the kind of greed that saw living creatures as nothing more than dollar signs. Clara felt the weight of that responsibility, but also the strength of her conviction. With Elias beside her, they would bring Royce's empire crashing down. The evidence was there, waiting to be uncovered. They just had to stay alive long enough to find it. Clara and Elias sat in his weathered pickup truck outside the county sheriff's office, watching the evening shift change. The late summer heat made the air shimmer above the asphalt. Are you sure about Deputy Collier? Clara asked, studying the young officer through the windshield as he walked to his patrol car. Nathan's different, Elias said. He's been documenting Royce's bribes to the department. Just hasn't known what to do with the information. They waited until Deputy Collier pulled out of the lot, then followed him to a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. Inside, the deputy sat alone in a corner booth, pushing scrambled eggs around his plate. Clara slid into the seat across from him, while Elias took position at the counter, watching the door. Nathan's tired eyes darted between them, his shoulders tense. "I know what you're gathering evidence on," Nathan said quietly. "And you're right about Royce. But speaking up," he glanced around the nearly empty diner. "Last deputy who crossed him had his house burned down. Ruled accidental, of course." Clara leaned forward. "We know the risks. But this is bigger than illegal hunting now. He's running an international trafficking operation." Nathan's fork clattered against his plate. "That explains the shipping containers I've seen going in and out at odd hours. And the foreign buyers who visit his compound. We need someone on the inside," Clara said. "Someone with access to patrol. Schedules, delivery routes." The deputy was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee. "I became a cop to help people. Instead, I've been watching corrupt officers take payoffs while animals suffer." He met Clara's eyes. "What do you need?" "From?" There, they drove across town to Oak Ridge Veterinary Clinic. Dr. Sarah Chun worked late, as usual. The small animal hospital was dark, except for the surgery suite where she was finishing her last procedure of the day. While they waited in the lobby, Elias explained how Dr. Chun had treated several of Royce's escaped acquisitions over the years. Exotic animals with crude restraint injuries, clearly meant for trafficking. She'd tried reporting it but was stonewalled at every turn. When Dr. Chun emerged, her eyes widened with recognition. "The wildlife rehabilitator. I've heard about your run-ins with Royce." She gestured them into her office, closing the door. About time someone stood up to him. Clara outlined what they'd discovered about the trafficking operation. Dr. Chun's face hardened as she listened. 3 years ago, I treated a juvenile tiger with infected wounds from transport chains," she said. "Before I could document everything, Royce's men showed up with paperwork claiming ownership. The tiger disappeared that night." She opened a locked drawer and pulled out a thick file. "But I kept records. Photos, blood work, everything that showed abuse." "We need more than past evidence," Clara explained. "We're planning to catch him in the act, document an actual exchange. But we'll need a safe place to treat any animals we rescue. Somewhere off his radar." Dr. Chun straightened her desk with precise movements. "My late husband and I built this practice to help animals. Since losing him, I've watched Royce hurt too many creatures I couldn't save." She looked up with fierce determination. "My facility is yours, whatever you need." Back at Eliezer Ranger Station, the small team gathered around a map of Royce's property. Nathan pointed out the security patrol patterns, while Dr. Chun advised on what medical supplies they'd need for different species. "The next shipment is scheduled for Tuesday night," Nathan said. 3 trucks coming in through the North Access Road. My sources say it's a major exchange. Multiple buyers." Clara traced the route with her finger. "If we can document the actual transfer and follow the trucks to their destination, I can coordinate with state patrol contacts," Elias added. "Have them ready to intercept once we have proof. And I'll have my clinic prepped for any animals we recover," Dr. Chun said. Already making supply lists. Clara looked around at these allies who'd risked everything to join her cause. A young deputy choosing conscience over career. A grieving vet turning her pain into purpose. And Elias, steady and true beside her through every step. They were outgunned and outnumbered. Royce had money, influence, and armed men at his disposal. But this small team had something stronger, an unshakable conviction that what they were doing was right. "Tuesday night, then," Clara said. We'll need cameras with night vision, medical kits, transport crates. They worked late into the night, planning every detail. It would be dangerous. If anything went wrong, Royce wouldn't hesitate to eliminate them all. But as Clara watched her unlikely team prepare for battle, she felt a surge of hope. Sometimes the smallest forces, united by compassion and courage, could topple the mightiest empires. The mother leopard's eyes haunted her thoughts. Soon, they would free her cubs. Soon, they would ensure no other animal suffered in Royce's cruel trade. They just had to execute their plan perfectly. The night air hung thick with tension as Clara checked her equipment one final time. 3. Compact surveillance cameras with night vision capability were secured in her vest, along with a mobile transmitter that would stream everything directly to Elias's secure server. She couldn't afford a single mistake. "Command post is set," Elias's voice crackled through her earpiece. He and Dr. Chen were positioned in a mobile vet unit 2 miles away, monitoring the feeds. Nathan confirms the buyers are approaching from the south entrance. Clara crouched in the dense undergrowth overlooking Royce's private loading dock. The facility was surprisingly well lit, harsh floodlights creating pools of yellow illumination against the darkness. 2 large shipping containers stood ready, their doors hanging open like hungry mouths. "Movement at the gate," Nathan whispered. Through the comm, from his position in the guard booth, he had a clear view of approaching vehicles. 3 SUVs, diplomatic plates. They're doing the security check now. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she mounted the first camera, concealing it within a cluster of leaves. The angle was perfect, capturing the entire loading area while remaining invisible from below. She quickly placed the second and third cameras in a triangulated pattern, ensuring no blind spots. "Buyers are through the gate," Nathan reported. 4 minutes until they reach you. The distant crunch of tires on gravel made Clara's pulse quicken. She retreated to her hiding spot, double-checking that the transmitter was running. The first video feed appeared on her phone's screen, crystal clear despite the low light. 3 black SUVs rolled into view, followed by Royce's personal vehicle. Clara held her breath as figures emerged. Royce's imposing form was unmistakable as he greeted 3 well-dressed men. Their accents carried clearly through the night air. Middle Eastern, she guessed, though she couldn't place the specific country. "The merchandise is prepared for transport?" one of the men asked. Royce's laugh boomed across the loading dock. "Of course. Prime specimens, just as promised." The mother was a bonus. These cubs are pure gold. Clara's fists clenched as 2 of Royce's men wheeled out metal crates. Inside, she could see the leopard cubs, sedated but alive. Their mother was nowhere in sight. "The streaming is solid," Elias confirmed in her ear. "Every word, every frame. We're getting it all." The buyers circled the crates, examining the cubs with clinical detachment. "Age? 4 months, Royce said. "Perfect for training. They'll be fully docile within weeks." "And the papers?" Royce patted a leather briefcase. "All the documentation you need. These cats will officially be listed as captive bred from a licensed facility. Customs won't blink." Clara's camera caught every detail. The exchange of documents, the careful inspection of the cubs, the casual way they discussed the fate of these wild creatures. Her heart pounded as one of the buyers reached for his jacket. Instead of a weapon, he produced a thick envelope. "Half now, as agreed. The rest when they clear customs." Royce thumbed through the cash, grinning. "Pleasure doing business. My men will help load them up." "Dr. Chun," Clara whispered, "are you getting the medical documentation?" The sedation they're using could be evidence of. A sharp burst of static cut through her earpiece. On her phone, the video feeds began to stutter. "Clara!" Elias's voice was urgent. "Something's interfering with the signal." The transmission is breaking up. She frantically adjusted the transmitter, but the interference grew stronger. Below, Roy suddenly stiffened, head turning toward the tree line. He pulled out what looked like a handheld scanner. "We've got signal bleed," he barked to his men. "Someone's broadcasting." Clara's blood ran cold as Royce's security team sprang into action, weapons drawn. Flashlight beams began sweeping the perimeter. "Clara, get out now." Nathan's voice was desperate. "They're calling in reinforcements from all posts." She scrambled backward through the underbrush, heart thundering. The video feeds were still transmitting. Intermittently, they had to have enough. Had to have captured the essential evidence before a spotlight caught her in its glare. "There!" Someone shouted. Clara ran. Branches whipped her face as she plunged through the darkness. Behind her, she could hear Royce bellowing orders, the sound of boots crashing through vegetation. "Nathan, kill the perimeter lights." She gasped. Into her come, the loading dock plunged into darkness, buying her precious seconds. She could hear Elias coordinating with their backup teams, Dr. Chun preparing for possible injuries. But none of that mattered if she couldn't escape with the transmitter intact. A bullet splintered bark near her head. Clara dove behind a fallen log, trying to control her ragged breathing. The transmitter was still working, still sending fragments of the most damning evidence they'd ever gathered against Royce's operation. She had to protect it. Had to get it to safety. Through her earpiece, she could hear the chaos unfolding across multiple channels. Nathan reporting that local police were approaching, compromised officers already moving to intercept state authorities. Dr. Chun tracking multiple vehicles leaving the compound. Ilias trying desperately to maintain their fragile network of communication. And, above it all, Royce's voice carried through the darkness. "Find her. I want that transmitter. No one leaves these woods until we have it." Clara pressed herself flat against the earth, clutching the device that contained their only hope of justice. The night was far from over. Clara's hands shook as she stared at her phone. The text message from Royce contained a single photo. Elias bound to a chair, his face bruised and bloody. Below it, 3 words: "Call this number." She pressed the phone to her ear, heart hammering. Royce's voice slithered through the speaker. "I trust I have your attention now. If you heard him, oh, I already have." His tone was casual, almost bored. "But how much more depends entirely on you." Through the connection, she heard a muffled grunt of pain. Her stomach lurched. "The evidence, all of it. You have 1 hour to bring it to the old lumber mill." Royce's voice hardened. "Come along. If I see anyone else, if I detect any transmission signals, any hint of police, well, your friend the ranger won't live long enough to regret it." The raid on Dr. Chun's property had been swift and merciless. Clara had arrived too late, finding the clinic in shambles, medical supplies scattered, cages emptied. Dr. Chun herself was in the hospital with a concussion. And Elias had been taken. Now she stood in what remained of their base of operations, the weight of the transmitter heavy in her hands. Hours of surveillance footage, financial records, shipping manifests, everything they needed to bring down Royce's trafficking empire. Everything they had risked their lives to gather. From a nearby holding pen, the leopard cubs whimpered. They had managed to rescue them during the chaos at the loading dock, but their mother was still missing, likely hidden away in one of Royce's facilities. The cubs' cries tore at Clara's heart, a reminder of all that was at stake. "You can't give him that evidence," Nathan said quietly. The young deputy's face was drawn with worry. "It's not just about the leopards anymore. We've documented dozens of illegal shipments, endangered species being sold across borders. This could shut down trafficking routes across 3 states. And, what about Elias?" Clara's voice cracked. "He only got involved because of me. because I convinced him to take a stand. She remembered their conversation just days ago, sitting on his porch as the sun set. How he had spoken about his time in the army, about losing people he couldn't protect. Sometimes, he had said, doing the right thing means carrying the weight of impossible choices. Now she understood exactly what he meant. The cubs cried again, and Clara closed her eyes. She saw the mother leopard's desperate trust when they first met, pleading for help with an intelligence that transcended species. She saw Elias's quiet strength, standing beside her despite knowing the risks. She saw Royce's smug face as he haggled over the lives of innocent creatures. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Royce. This time, a video. Elias, coughing blood onto the concrete floor. A boot entered the frame, connecting with his ribs. 45 minutes, the text read. Clara's fingers tightened around the transmitter. The weight of lives, human and animal, pressed down on her shoulders. Every path forward seemed to lead to loss. He knew what he was signing up for. Nathan said gently, Elias would want you to finish this, to stop Royce once and for all. But Clara couldn't shake the image of Elias in that chair, suffering because he had believed in her cause, because he had believed in her. The cubs' whimpers had turned to desperate mewling, calling for a mother they might never see again. Their fear echoed Clara's own turmoil, the terror of abandonment, of failing those who depended on her. She thought of all the animals they had documented in Royce's operation. Endangered tigers sedated and shipped in crude crates. Wolf pups, torn from their dens. Snow leopards drugged and sold to private collectors. How many more would suffer if Royce continued his trade? But Elias's life, the thought of sacrificing him for the greater good, made her physically ill. This wasn't some abstract moral calculation. This was Elias, who had pulled her from that river, who had tended her wounds, who looked at her with eyes that understood the depth of her conviction. Her phone buzzed again. 30 minutes. Tick-tock. Clara sank into a chair. The transmitter clutched to her chest like a lifeline. The cubs' cries filled the room, a constant reminder of innocence. At the mercy of cruelty. Every second that passed was another moment of Elias in pain. Another moment for Royce to demonstrate his brutality. She had wanted to be a hero, to prove that one person's dedication to truth could overcome corruption and greed. But now, faced with this impossible choice, she understood the true cost of standing against evil. It wasn't her own safety at stake. It was the lives of those she had drawn into her fight. The timer on her phone continued its merciless countdown. Each passing minute brought her closer to a decision that would haunt her either way. Save Elias and let Royce's empire continue its cruel trade, or sacrifice the man she had come to care for deeply in service of the greater good. The cubs' cries grew louder, more desperate. Clara buried her face in her hands, their fear and her own grief blending into a symphony of helplessness. The decision crystallized in Clara's mind with startling clarity. She wouldn't let Royce win, not like this. With trembling hands, she tucked the transmitter deep inside her boot and checked her phone's GPS coordinates one last time. Royce's hunting lodge loomed ahead, a sprawling timber structure that seemed to mock everything the wilderness stood for. Guard posts dotted the perimeter, but Clara had studied the patrol patterns. She knew there was a blind spot near the ammunition storage. Royce's hubris meant he kept enough firepower for a small army. The night air hung thick with humidity as she crept through the underbrush. Her heart pounded so loud she feared it would give her away. A guard passed by, flashlight beams sweeping the darkness. Clara pressed herself against rough bark, barely breathing until he moved on. She reached the lodge's outer wall, finding the loose board Elias had once mentioned during their surveillance. The wood groaned softly as she worked it free. Inside, the rich smell of gunpowder filled her nostrils. Boxes of ammunition lined the walls, along with hunting rifles and more sinister weapons. Voices approached. Clara ducked behind a stack of crates, her boots scraping against metal. The transmitter pressed against her ankle, a reminder of everything at stake. "Check the stocks again," a gruff voice ordered. "Boss wants everything ready for tomorrow's shipment." Footsteps drew closer. Clara's fingers found a loose shell casing on the floor. With a quick prayer, she tossed it toward the far corner. The metallic ping drew the guard's attention. What was that? As he turned to investigate, Clara slipped through the inner door. The lodge's main hall stretched before her, all polished wood and mounted trophies. Their glass eyes seemed to follow her movement. A muffled grunt from below caught her attention. The basement. Of course, Royce would keep Elias underground, away from prying eyes. She found the stairs behind a heavy door, descending into darkness. The sight that greeted her made her blood boil. Elias sat bound to a chair, his face bruised and bloody. But his eyes, those steady, brave eyes, lit up when he saw her. Before she could reach him, a gunshot cracked through the air. Pain blazed across her arm as the bullet grazed her. She dove behind a support beam as Royce's voice boomed through the basement. "I knew you'd come," he sneered. "Always too stubborn to know when you're beaten." Another shot splintered the wood by her head. But in that moment, Clara heard something else, a distant boom, followed by shouts of alarm from above. The ammunition storage. A dropped shell casing must have sparked something. Smoke began seeping through the floorboards as chaos erupted overhead. The lodge trembled with the first explosion, and Clara knew her chance had come. Dawn painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks as smoke still curled from the charred remains of Royce's hunting lodge. The acrid smell of burnt wood hung heavy in the morning air. Black SUVs and federal vehicles surrounded the property, their lights flashing silently in the early morning light. Clara sat on the back of an ambulance, a blanket draped over her shoulders. Her arm throbbed where the bullet had grazed her, but the pain felt distant compared to the overwhelming relief. She watched as federal agents led Royce away in handcuffs, his once imposing figure now diminished. His expensive hunting clothes were soot-stained and torn, his face twisted with impotent rage. "Your entire operation is finished," the lead agent informed him, holding up a sealed evidence bag containing Clara's transmitter. "We have everything. The trafficking network, the buyer lists, the offshore accounts." Elias approached Clara, his face cleaned of blood, but still showing bruises. His steady presence beside her felt like an anchor in the chaos. "The cubs?" he asked softly. Clara smiled, pointing toward the tree line where a wildlife transport vehicle was parked. "Safe." The vet checked them out. "They're dehydrated but otherwise okay." She paused, her voice growing warmer. "Their mother hasn't left. She's been watching from the ridge since we got them out." As if on cue, a low rumble echoed from the distant trees. Through the morning mist, they could make out the leopard's sleek form, her eyes gleaming as she kept vigil over her cubs. Federal agents continued to sweep through the property, discovering more evidence of Royce's crimes with each passing hour. Cases of falsified permits, records of illegal sales, and proof of bribery emerged from hidden safes and secret compartments. The scope of his operation stunned even the seasoned investigators. "Ms. Winton," called the lead agent, walking over with purpose. "We've been briefed on how this investigation began. Your dedication to uncovering this operation, despite the personal risk." He shook his head in admiration. "This isn't just about saving a few cubs anymore. You've helped us break up one of the largest wildlife trafficking rings in the region." Clara felt tears welling up in her eyes as years of being dismissed and belittled washed away. All those times she'd been called oversensitive, told she was imagining things, or that she should leave law enforcement to the professionals. Vindication felt sweeter than she'd imagined. Elias's hand found hers, squeezing gently. The touch sent warmth through her entire body, grounding her in the moment. When she looked up at him, she saw in his eyes everything they'd been through together. The fear, the determination, and now something deeper that had grown between them. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. "You would have found a way," he replied with a slight smile. "But I'm glad I could help." The sun climbed higher as the morning progressed. Clara watched as the cubs were carefully loaded for transport to a rehabilitation facility. Their mother paced at the edge of the woods, and Clara knew she would follow. Her babies to their temporary home. Something in Clara's chest loosened, a tension she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten it was there. Justice had been served, not just for these leopards, but for all the animals Royce had victimized. His empire of cruelty had crumbled, and in its place, a new chapter was beginning. Elias helped her to her feet, his touch lingering longer than necessary. Together, they watched the wildlife transport pull away, carrying precious cargo toward a brighter future. If you believe stories can heal, lift, and connect us, this channel is for you. Thanks for being here. Hit subscribe, and I'll meet you again tomorrow with something real.